If you had told me that the night I walked out the back door of a greasy little diner smelling like French fries and burnt coffee would be the night my whole life flipped upside down, I would have laughed in your face because all I wanted right then was a hot shower, instant noodles, and 8 hours of sleep where nobody called me hun and snapped their fingers for refills. Instead, I stepped into an alley and heard a sound that still lives in my bones. At first I thought it was just a cat, or some bottle rolling around in the wind. It was February, the kind of cold that bites, and I remember thinking, if some raccoon jumps out at me, I'm done. But then I heard it again, this tiny broken whimper, not an animal, not trash. Something in my chest just pulled tight, and I followed it to a refrigerator box shoved up against the brick wall. I peeled back the flap, and there she was. This little girl curled up like someone had tossed her out with the leftovers. No shoes, no coat, just a filthy, thin dress and a ripped stuffed bear pressed to her chest. Her lips were blue. Her teeth were clicking so hard I could hear it over the traffic at the end of the alley. And what wrecked me most were her eyes. She wasn't even crying, just staring up at me with this hollow look, like she had already decided nobody was coming. "Oh my God," I remember whispering, and I don't know if I said it as a prayer or a curse. I just stripped off my red coat. The only decent thing I owned wrapped it around her and picked her up, and she weighed nothing, just bones and fear, and she didn't fight, didn't say a word, just clung to my neck like I was the last warm thing in the world. Now, in a perfect, responsible adult world, this is the part where I'm supposed to say I pulled out my phone and called 911 right there in the alley, but I didn't. My fingers were too numb, her skin was too cold, and my brain was just screaming, "Get her warm, get her inside." So I walked 6 blocks through dirty snow and cracked sidewalks carrying this stranger's child against my chest, while I tried not to think about what kind of monster leaves a 5-year-old behind a diner. My apartment back then was a one-room lie. A bed shoved in one corner, a couch that sagged in the middle, a tiny stove that worked when it felt like it, but the radiator rattled enough to keep the place warm. I set her on the edge of my chipped bathtub, turned on the hot water, and did that little elbow test my grandma taught me, all while talking soft. "Hey baby, you're okay. I've got you. You're safe now," even though my own voice was trembling. When I peeled off that dress, I could count almost every rib. When I washed the dirt out of her hair, I saw a small birthmark behind her left ear shaped like a crooked heart. I remember thinking, that's kind of pretty, and having no idea how important that little mark really was. After the bath, I wrapped her in my biggest towel, found an old green t-shirt that hit her past the knee, heated up instant chicken soup on my ancient stove and handed her a mug. She wrapped both hands around it like it was gold, sipping, slow eyes still on me, like she was waiting for the part where I turned mean. "Can you tell me your name, sweetheart?" I asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. I had just given up for her. She stared at me for a long moment, like she was weighing whether it was worth the risk to answer. Then this whisper came out barely there. "Lila." I said it back to her, "Lila," letting it settle in the room. Then I nodded at the ripped teddy bear. "And what's his name?" A tiny flicker crossed her face, the ghost of a smile. "Captain Buttons," she said, like she was telling me a secret. That night I lay on my lumpy couch, still in my work shoes, staring at the water stain on the ceiling and listening to the soft sound of her breathing. Every responsible thought in my head was yelling, "You have to call the cops. You have to call child services. This is huge." But every time I pictured some stranger in a uniform pulling her out of my bed and separating her from the first safe room she'd seen in God knows how long, my stomach twisted, so I cut a deal with myself and with the universe. "Tomorrow," I whispered, "she gets one night of sleep where nobody questions her tomorrow. I'll do the right thing." Morning came with the smell of burning and the sound of metal clattering. I shot up, thinking the building was on fire, raced to the little kitchen area, and found Lila standing on a chair in front of my stove, a pan smoking on the burner, and her small hand reaching right toward it. No, no, no. I grabbed the pan, turned off the gas, shoved it aside, my heart pounding out of my chest. Sweetheart, you cannot use the stove by yourself, you'll get hurt. She looked up at me with those big hazel eyes, terrified like she was about to be punished, and said in this shaky little voice, I was hungry. I wanted to make breakfast. You know that feeling when your heart cracks and melts at the same time? Yeah, that happened. I knelt so we were eye to eye, wiped a bit of soot off her cheek. Okay, listen, that was brave. All right? But from now on, if you're hungry, you wake me up. I don't care if it's 3 a.m, deal. She thought about it, gave this serious little nod, and ate the eggs I made like she hadn't seen real food in days. After breakfast, I took her down the hall to my neighbor, Miss D, retired nurse. Unofficial building. Grandma, the woman who'd slipped me grocery money more times than I like to admit. When my tips came up short, Miss D opened the door, took one look at Lila half hiding behind my leg, and went, Lord have mercy, what did this world do now? So I told her the alley, the box, the blue lips, the crooked heart, birthmark, all of it. By the time I finished, her eyes were wet, and her mouth was tight. She put the kettle on, guided us to her cluttered little living room that smelled like cinnamon and old books, and pressed a small chipped angel figurine into Lila's hand. You can keep that one, she said. Angels look out for each other. When I hung up with the police dispatcher a little later, Lila was watching me, clutching that angel so hard her knuckles were white. Are they gonna take me away? She asked, voice flat like she already knew the answer, and was just waiting for me to confirm it. They're going to try to find your family. I told her, my throat tight. The people who are supposed to love you. Nobody loves me, she said. Just like that, no drama, and I swear I felt something inside me snap. I took her little face in my hands, looked straight into those eyes that had seen way too much already. That is not true. I've only known you since last night, and I already care about you so much, it scares me. Miss D just gave you one of her angels. She doesn't give those to just anyone. Sometimes we just haven't found all our people yet, that's all. She studied me for a second, then reached out and touched my cheek with these tiny, cold fingers. Will you be my friend? She whispered. And I said, that's a lifetime contract, kid, I'm in. And Detective Serena Clark showed up about an hour later. She wasn't what I expected. No bark, no eye rolling, just this steady, calm energy. She sat on my old couch, notebook in hand, and let me tell the whole story without rushing me. Then she got down on one knee in front of Lila, asked her about the man in the brown coat who smelled bad, who put her in the box and told her to be quiet, or monsters would get her. I watched Serena's jaw tighten at that, but her voice stayed soft. She took pictures, especially of the birthmark, behind Lila's ear, and then said the thing I had been dreading. Normally, we'd place her in temporary foster care while we investigate. My chest locked up, the words came out before I could stop them. Can she stay with me just for a little while? She hasn't let me out of her sight. She's terrified. I know I'm just some waitress in a terrible apartment, but I can keep her safe until we know what's going on. Serena studied me for a long beat, then said, if you're willing to do a full background check, and you understand this is temporary, we can try it. I would have signed in blood if she'd asked. 4 days later, my phone rang while Lila and I were sprawled on the floor, drawing houses with rainbow trees. Naomi, it's Serena. We found a match. I need you to bring Lila to the station. I swear, my hands started shaking, so hard, I almost dropped the phone at the station. She sat us down in a small room with a box of toys in the corner. and laid a file on the table. She pulled out a photo of a baby in a blanket, maybe 6 months old, same dark curls, same hazel eyes, same crooked heart behind the ear. Her name is Chloe Grace Ward. Serena said she was kidnapped from her home 5 years ago. Her father has been searching ever since. My brain stalled for a second. Ward as in Ward Global, I asked, as in Ethan Ward. She nodded. He's on his way here now. That was the twist, the moment the story went from poor waitress found an abandoned kid to you're holding the missing daughter of one of the richest men in the city. And let me tell you something that does not come with a manual, it comes with nausea. When Ethan walked into that room, he didn't look like the smug billionaire on magazine covers. He looked like a tired man who had spent 5 years breathing on autopilot. The suit was perfect, sure, but his tie was crooked, and his eyes were wrecked. He saw Chloe. The name still felt strange in my mouth, and everything else disappeared. He stopped a few feet away like he was afraid to scare her off. Voice cracking on her name, Chloe. Is it really you? She pressed into my side so hard I could feel her heartbeat through my shirt. I just wrapped my arm around her and said quietly, she doesn't remember anything from before you're a stranger to her right now, just go slow. He nodded, knelt down so he was on her level, scars already spilling. Hi, he said. I'm Ethan. I'm your dad. I know that probably sounds crazy, but I have loved you every single day since the day you were born. Chloe peeked at him, eyes sliding down to his tie. You have ducks, she said softly. There were tiny yellow ducks marching across expensive navy silk. He let out this strangled little laugh. Your mom bought it to make me look less scary, he told her, and just like that, there was a ghost of a bridge between them. Serena broke down the DNA test, the odds, the timeline. Ethan didn't take his eyes off Chloe, but when she stepped out to make some calls, he finally looked at me, really looked. You're the one who found her, he said. In a box behind a diner, you kept her warm, you fed her, you gave her your bed. He pulled out a card, pushed it across the table. Name what you want, and it's yours, money, college, a house, anything. I remember actually laughing from pure nerves. I don't want your money, I said. I just want to know she's going to be okay. He stared at me like that answer did not compute in his world. And before he could argue, Chloe tugged my sleeve and whispered, if I go with him, will you come too? That's how I ended up walking into a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows in jeans I bought at a thrift store, holding the hand of a billionaire's daughter, and trying not to flinch when I saw my reflection in chrome surfaces. That season of my life felt like learning a new language in a country where everyone kept assuming I was the help, and then being confused when they learned I kind of was. I had my own suite bigger than my old apartment, a paycheck that didn't make me want to cry, but my actual job was simple and impossibly complicated at the same time. Make sure Chloe felt safe, help her trust this man who loved her, but felt like a stranger and apparently translate between two worlds. Chloe clung to me at first, every question she was asked. She looked at me before answering. She hoarded food under her pillow for a while, screamed in her sleep. Hated closed doors and would only let Ethan close if I was in the room. I watched him try so hard, reading every book about trauma he could get his hands on, rearranging his schedule so he could be home for dinner, asking me, is this too much? Should I back off? Is this okay? And I realized something kind of wild. Under the money and the glass and the assistance, he was just a broken dad trying not to screw up a second chance. Somewhere in there, without me noticing, the exact moment we stopped just being the billionaire and the waitress who found his kid, and became something like a team, then something more. There was the night he offered me a job, officially. Stay, he said in the kitchen, leaning awkwardly against the counter, while I made a sandwich like old habits die hard. Not just for a week, stay as long as she needs. I'll pay you a real salary, give you security. All I want is for you to keep doing what you're doing. I started to say no on instinct. I'm a diner waitress, Ethan. This is not my world. And he shook his head. My world wasn't working very well before you walked into it. There was the dinner where Chloe was with her therapist, and he finally admitted what had been hanging between us, that he wasn't just grateful, he was falling in love with me, and I had to admit I'd been falling right along with him. Which, yeah, complicated, doesn't even begin to cover it. But when someone looks at you like you are the reason their daughter laughs again, it's kind of hard to pretend you don't feel anything. And then there was the phone call from Serena months later. We arrested him, she said. The man who took her. A former employee fired for stealing from the company. A man whose life went off a cliff and decided to drag a baby with him. I listened to her outline how he planned a ransom, panicked when the investigation got too hot, hid her for years, then left her somewhere she'd be found. And I thought about that box in February, the way her lips were turning blue, and I had to put the phone down and walk away for a minute because my hands were shaking. Ethan wanted to see him, to look in the eyes of the guy who stole 5 years from his daughter. Serena was hesitant, but she arranged it. He came home afterward quieter than I'd ever seen him. We sat in his office, the city glowing through the glass behind him, and he said, "He remembers me, Naomi." I didn't even remember his name. I fired him and went on with my day, and he took my baby. You didn't make him do that. I told him, fingers wrapped around his. You signed a paper because he broke rules. He made a choice to become a monster. Those are not the same thing. He looked at me and asked, if I'd treated people better, would this have happened? And I didn't have a perfect answer. I just said, maybe this is your chance to do better now, not because you owe that man anything, but because you know what happens when people fall through cracks nobody pays attention to. We built something from there, not some fairy tale where money fixed everything, but a messy real life where Chloe still had bad nights, where I still panicked sometimes that I didn't belong, where Ethan still carried guilt like a second skin, but we carried it together. We got married in his parents' backyard with roses blooming and folding chairs on the grass. His sister crying my Miss D in the front row, waving a tissue like a flag, Chloe standing between us in a yellow dress, holding our hands and announcing to everyone, "We're a real family now." And for the first time since my mom overdosed when I was a kid, I believed I had a home that nobody could just yank away, you know what I mean. And still, when we sat in that same diner booth, where it all started months later, during a quiet December evening, with snow outside and greasy smell in the air, I looked around and thought, why me? Why was I the one who walked out that door at that exact second? Why was I the one who got the second chance and the penthouse and the kid and the man who finally understood that love wasn't about what you had, but what you gave? While other waitresses in that same place were still counting crumpled singles, still being snapped at like they were invisible. And that's the kind of question that doesn't really have a clean answer. So I'm going to hand that part to you, because I know some people will say, I got lucky. Some will say, I got what I deserved for being kind when it didn't benefit me. Some will say, the real justice is that the man who took Chloe is in a cell now. And some will argue justice would have been making sure he never got desperate enough to think that way in the first place. Was I a hero? Or just a girl who did what any decent person should have done? Does Ethan get to call himself a good man now because he changed? Or does what happened sit on him forever? Is this a happy ending or a messy middle where we're all just trying to do better with what we've been handed? Tell me in the comments what you think. Who was right? Who was wrong? What part of this story hit you the hardest? And have you ever seen someone judged because they were poor or from the wrong side of town, and then watched them prove everybody wrong? I'd really love to hear your stories too. And if you made it all the way to the end with me, don't forget to like, subscribe, share this with someone who needs a little reminder that the person everyone underestimates might be the one who changes everything.